Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me today on this day in Salford on Sunday the 7th of June 2026. Today I'm starting a new Masechta. Well, it's actually this is the second book of the Scheinstals, Bava Kamma 2. So it's going to be starting on Daf 62 Amud B. And I'm going to do the introduction. So the introduction to Perek 7. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. And that's Exodus 21:37. If the theft shall be found in his possession alive, whether it is an ox or a donkey or sheep, he shall pay double. Exodus 22:3. And the final pasuk that we're going to go through. If a man shall gives his neighbor money or vessels to safeguard, and it was stolen from the house of the man, if the thief shall be found, he shall pay double. If the thief shall not be found, the owner of the house shall approach the judges to determine if he misappropriated his neighbor's goods. For any matter of trespass from an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a garment, for any lost item about which one shall say, "This is it," the claims of both of them shall come before the judges. The one whom the judges convict shall pay double to his neighbor, and that's Exodus 22:6-8. This chapter deals mainly with the fines imposed upon a thief, double payment in ordinary circumstances, and a 4-fold or 5-fold payment if the thief steals a sheep or an ox and then slaughters or sells it. Whereas repayment of the principal amount stolen is a simple monetary reimbursement, specific halachot apply to the fines imposed by the Torah, which take effect in a limited set of circumstances. Several basic questions are addressed, such as: in which precise cases is the thief obligated to pay these fines? What is the relationship between the double payment and the 4-fold or 5-fold payment? Other issues discussed in this chapter involve cases in which the thief, during the course of the act of theft, commits a transgression involving a serious punishment. At times, this can lead to cancellation of the monetary obligation incurred through the theft itself. Another question is whether the testimony of 2 separate sets of witnesses, one concerning the thief of an animal and the other is slaughter or sale, can be combined into a single incriminating testimony. Furthermore, it is necessary to establish the punishment for conspiring witnesses who testify about the theft of an animal or about its slaughter or sale or both. So let's dive into the text. So the Mishnah. The principle of double payment applies more broadly. So what does that mean? Meruba midas taslume chayfel. Rabbeinu Yonatan of Lonel writes that after having completed the discussion of the primary categories of damage that are caused by one's property, i.e. the primary categories of goring, eating and trampling, and the categories of fire and pit, the Mishnah turns attention to a type of damage caused by the person himself, namely theft. Damage caused by a person was introduced early in the tractate, as according to Rav and 3b, damage caused by a person is the primary category of maveh, mentioned in the first Mishnah of the tractate in 2a. Even according to those who disagree with Rav and maintain that damage caused directly by a person is not mentioned in that Mishnah, it is mentioned in the list of the primary categories of damage recorded by Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shai in 4b. What's the other footnote regarding that? If witnesses testify that an individual stole an item from another person, the thief must pay the victim double the value of the stolen item. Furthermore, if one stole an ox or sheep and slaughtered or sold it, he must pay 4 times the value of the sheep or 5 times the value of an ox. And that's from the Rambam Sefer Nazich and Hilchot Geneva 1.6, the Torah Choshen Mishpat 348. Then the principle of 4-fold or 5-fold payment. As the principle of double payment applies both to the theft of something that is alive and to the theft of something that is not alive. But the principle of 4-fold or 5-fold payment applies only to the theft of an ox or sheep. As is stated, if a man shall steal an ox or a sheep and then slaughter it or sell it, he shall pay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. And that's in Exodus 21:37. Having stated the limitations of halachah of 4-fold and 5-fold payment, the Mishnah mentions a further limitation which applies to all 3 types of payments. One who steals an item after a theft. So what does that mean? Hagonev echad hagenav. If one steals a stolen item from a thief, he is not required to make double payment to either the first thief or to the prior owner, even if the prior owner of an item has already despaired of recovering it. Similarly, if one steals an ox or sheep from a thief, and then slaughters or sells it, he is not required to pay the fourfold or fivefold payment. And that's the Rambam Sefer Nezikin, Hilchot Geneva 117, Toshel Choshen Mishpat 250, has already stolen it, i.e. one who steals a stolen item does not pay the double payment to the thief or to the prior owner, nor does one who slaughters or sells an ox or a sheep after a thief has already stolen it pay the fourfold or fivefold payment. Rather, he pays only the principal, i.e. the value of the item he stole. The Gemara. The Mishnah teaches one particular difference between double payment and fourfold or fivefold payment, while it does not teach this difference between them. The principle of a double payment applies both in the case of a thief and in the case of a bailey, who falsely states that the claim that the thief stole To'ein ta'anas ganav. In the case of a bailey who takes a false oath claiming that an item entrusted to him has been stolen, and witnesses subsequently testify that his claim was false and that the item is in his possession, the bailey is considered a thief and must pay the owner of an item double its value. If he slaughtered or sold an ox or sheep after taking the oath, he pays fourfold or fivefold payment. Rambam Sefer Nezikin Hilchot Geneva 4:1 Torah Mishpat 252. The deposit entrusts to him and who takes an oath to that effect. But the principle of fourfold or fivefold payment applies only in the case of a thief, not in the case of one who falsely claims that the deposit was stolen. The fact that the Mishnah does not teach the latter distinction supports the opinion of Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, in the case of one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole a deposit from him, and it is discovered that he himself is a thief, he pays double payment. And if the stolen item is an ox or sheep, and he slaughters or sold it, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. According to Rabbi Chia bar Abba, there is no difference between the application of double payment and fourfold or fivefold payment in this case. There are those who say a different version of this discussion. And let us say that the Mishnah supports the opinion of Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, in the case of one who falsely states a claim and a thief stole the deposit from him, and it's discovered that he himself is a thief, he pays double payment. And if the stolen item is an ox or sheep and he slaughtered or sold it, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. The Gemara rejects the inference. Does the Mishnah teach that there is no difference between double payment and fourfold or fivefold payment, except for one mentioned in the Mishnah? It teaches merely that the principle of double payment applies more broadly than the principle of fourfold or fivefold payment, and it provides an example of this statement. This does not mean that this is the only difference, and it is possible that the Tana taught this one case and omitted others. The Mishnah teaches that the principle of double payment applies both to the theft of something that is alive and to the theft of something that is not alive. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? It is that the sages taught in a Braita with regard to the verse that discusses double payment. For any matter of trespass, whether it be for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a garment, or for any other lost thing about which one shall say, that is it. The claims of both of them shall come before the judges. The one whom the judges convict shall pay double in it to his neighbor. This is 22:8. For any matter of trespass is a generalization, whether it be for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, or for a garment is a detail. And when the verse states, or for any other manner of a lost thing, it then generalizes again. Consequently, the verse contains a generalization and a detail and generalization. So let's explain the usages of that method. Kalal lefar to kalal. This method of derivation employs the following logic. If the Torah had intended to include all matters in a particular halacha, it would have been enough to write the first generalization. If it had intended to exclude all matters except for the details mentioned, it could have written merely the details after the generalization. Since it added a further generalization after the details, it intended to add other matters that are comparable in their characteristics to those mentioned in the Torah. And one of the 13 rules of exegesis states that in such a case you may deduce that the verse is referring only to items similar to the detail. Therefore, just as each of the items mentioned in the detail is clearly defined as an item that is movable property and has intrinsic monetary value, so too double payment is practiced with regard to any item that is movable property and has intrinsic monetary value. land is excluded. Yasu Kalakos, land is excluded. Tosfot explained how it is possible to steal land. One who owns land extends the border markers into the adjacent property of his neighbor, therefore annexing some of it. Another case is where one steals fruits from a tree, as fruit that is attached to a tree is categorized as land. One who steals land, Canaanite slaves, or financial documents returns what he stole, but does not pay the double payment. And that's from the Rambam Sefer Nezichin, Hilchah Neva 2:2, Torah and Choshen Mishpat 350. And this is not movable property. Canaanite slaves are excluded as they are compared to land. So what does that mean? Avodim ha-shehukshu lekarkaos. It is explained in the Jewish Talmud that slaves are excluded because one benefits only from the labor rather than from the actual bodies. The slave referred to here is a Canaanite slave. The state of a Hebrew slave is like that of any other Jew, and that punishment for kidnapping and selling a fellow Jew is execution. Since monetary fines are not imposed in cases subject to the death penalty, there is no discussion of double payment for one who steals a Hebrew slave. In many areas of halacha, financial documents are excluded as although they are movable property, they do not have intrinsic monetary value. The value of the material on which the document is written is negligible. The documents are valuable only because they serve as proof for monetary claims. Finally, consecrated property is excluded. Yasa Hekdesh, consecrated property is excluded. One who steals consecrated property does not have to pay the double payment. Rambam Sefer Nezichin, Hilchah Neva 2:1, Torah Choshen Mishpat 350. Because it is written in the verse, that the one found liable shall pay double to his neighbor, i.e. to another person rather than to the temple treasury. The Gemara asks, if the law of double payment is limited to cases similar to the details mentioned in the verse, it should also be derived that just as each of the items mentioned in the detail is clearly defined as an item whose carcass transmits impurity through contact and carrying, Vitame B'maga of Masa. Regional impurity in the Torah typically refers to impurity imparted through contact, i.e. when a personal object comes in direct contact with the source of impurity. If there is an object interposing between the individual and the source of impurity, the interposing object is susceptible to its impurity but generally does not transmit the impurity to the person. Yet there are some sources of original impurity, such as most animal carcasses, a zav and a menstruating woman, whose impurity is transmitted by carrying the source of impurity, even if there is no direct contact. So to any item whose carcass transmits impurity through contact and carrying is subject to double payment, but birds whose carcasses do not transmit impurity through contact or carrying should not be subject to double payment. The Gemara objects to this question. Now, how can you say this? But isn't garment written in the list of specified items in Exodus 22:8? It's impossible to speak of the impurity of carcasses with regard to clothing. The Gemara responds, say in response to this objection, we are speaking specifically of animals, and this is the question that was asked. Why not say that with regard to animals, an animal whose carcass transmits impurity through contact and carrying, yes, it is subject to double payment, whereas an animal's carcass does not transmit impurity through contact and carrying, such as a bird, no, a thief would not pay double payment for stealing it. That's the end of the Omen. Thank you for listening and I wish you a very good day. All the best. Bye.